Luma woke to the same cold, dark room she had lived in for as long as she could remember. The walls were made of dull metal, smooth but unwelcoming, and the faint hum of machines echoed through the hallways outside. Chains hung loosely around her wrists, reminders of the life she had been forced to live. Every morning, the slavers came to check on her, bringing food or giving orders, and she had learned long ago that any sign of defiance would be met with punishment. Despite her captivity, Luma never let despair take over. She had silver eyes that could catch even the smallest flicker of light, and she used them to study the shadows. She remembered stories from the old ones of her kind, tales of freedom, courage, and distant worlds filled with bright skies and wide oceans. Those stories kept her mind alive and her spirit quiet but strong. The room was small, with only a metal bed and a feeding tray. Luma often pressed her hands against the walls, tracing the grooves and imagining a path that might lead her out. The chains were heavy, but she had learned to move carefully, finding strength in small exercises that stretched her muscles and kept her body ready. Every movement, every careful step, was a practice in patience and hope. Outside her cell, the slavers moved with cold efficiency. They never spoke to her as a person. To them, she was a prize, an object of curiosity and rare value. They had many such captives, but Luma knew she was different. She had an intelligence that often surpassed theirs, and she paid attention to details that even the guards did not notice. She observed their schedules, the way the doors clicked when they opened, and the patterns in their patrols. These observations became secret tools, hidden in her mind like precious stones. One night, as she lay on the thin mattress, Luma stared at the tiny window high above. Through the thick glass, she could see distant stars twinkling, small points of light in the vast darkness of space. She reached her hand toward them as if she could touch those distant suns. The stars reminded her of the stories she had heard, of other worlds, other lives, and the possibility that she might one day be free. She whispered to herself, a soft sound almost lost in the hum of machinery, promising that she would not give up. The days passed slowly. Meals were small and bland, and the guards were always watchful. Luma learned to make the most of her moments alone. She practiced controlling her breathing, quieting her thoughts, and moving with precision. She learned to listen to the faintest sounds, the creak of a door hinge, the shuffle of a boot, the subtle vibration of machinery through the floor. These skills were not just for survival, they were preparation. She knew one day she would need every sense and every skill to escape. One afternoon, a new figure appeared in the courtyard beyond her enclosure. Luma had not seen him before. He walked with calm steps, not hurried, not aggressive, and his eyes seemed curious rather than cruel. Luma watched him carefully from her shadowed corner. Humans were rare on this planet, and she had only heard stories of them from other captives. They were different from the slavers. They were said to be clever, compassionate, and full of strange ingenuity. The human's name was Nilo. He moved slowly through the compound, observing everything. He did not touch the machines, did not disturb the workers, and most importantly, he did not look at Luma as a prize. He looked at her as if she were a person, and that small difference sparked a flicker of something long dormant inside her, hope. Days went by, and Nilo continued to explore the compound. Luma watched him carefully. She noticed small gestures he made, how he spoke softly to a worker struggling with machinery, how he avoided anger and confrontation, and how his eyes often drifted toward her, curious but gentle. She began to feel something she had not felt in a long time, trust. She realized that this human might be different, that he might understand that she was not an object but a being with thoughts, dreams, and the right to live freely. Luma began to communicate in small ways. She tapped her fingers in patterns against the metal bars, leaving messages only someone paying attention could notice. She moved objects slightly to form symbols, showing she was intelligent and alert. Nilo noticed these small signals. At first, he thought it was coincidence, but soon he realized she was trying to communicate. He smiled quietly to himself, impressed by her cleverness. Every night, Luma returned to the small window, her eyes tracing the stars. But now, she imagined something different. She imagined a human walking beside her on distant worlds, sharing knowledge, strength, and courage. She imagined freedom, not as a distant dream, but as a goal within reach. She imagined herself running, laughing, and exploring without chains, with the stars above her head instead of metal bars. Inside, she felt a small fire grow. The chains around her wrists were still heavy, and the walls were still cold, but her mind was no longer captive. She began to plan carefully, thinking of the guard's weaknesses, the patterns she had memorized, and the clever ways she could move unseen. She began to trust Nilo not only as a human but as an ally, someone who might help her find the strength she needed to act. For the first time in years, Luma allowed herself to hope. Hope was dangerous in this place, but it was also powerful. It made her more careful, more observant, and more determined. Every gesture, every glance, every tiny movement became part of a larger plan. She would not remain a pet. She would not remain chained. She would find her freedom, and when the time came, she would seize it. And so, in the darkness of her cell, Luma prepared. She prepared her mind, her body, and her heart. She watched the stars, learned the patterns of the slavers, and paid attention to Nilo, the human who did not look at her as a prize. Somewhere in the distance, the first steps of a future unknown began to take shape. Luma did not know what awaited her, but she knew one thing: her life was about to change. The hum of machinery continued, the chains still weighed on her wrists, and the walls still confined her. Yet, for the first time in her life, Luma felt that change was possible. Freedom was not just a story. It was a plan. And that plan would begin the moment she found courage enough to act. The mining compound was alive with activity, yet it was an artificial life, cold and calculated. Machines roared and clanked, sending vibrations through the floor. Workers moved with heavy steps, tired from long hours, while the guards kept watch, their faces expressionless. Luma observed everything from the shadows of her cell. Her silver eyes reflected faint light as she studied the movements, the patterns, and the subtle openings that could someday become paths to freedom. Then she noticed him again. The human had returned. Nilo moved through the compound with calm confidence, carrying nothing more than a small pack and a notepad. He stopped to speak quietly with workers, offering advice about machinery and efficiency. He did not touch anyone roughly, and he certainly did not threaten the slavers. His presence was unusual, and the slavers glanced at him with suspicion, but he smiled politely and moved along without fear. Luma's heart beat faster. She had seen many outsiders before, but none had drawn her attention in this way. Nilo's curiosity was different. He was careful, quiet, and observant. He did not glance at her like she was property. Instead, his eyes lingered briefly, thoughtful and respectful. That small difference, invisible to the guards, made Luma feel a spark of hope. Perhaps, she thought, this human could understand. Perhaps he could help her. Over the next few days, Nilo moved through the compound, observing quietly and taking notes. He studied the guards' schedules, the rotation of shifts, and the placement of security cameras. Luma watched him from her cell and realized he was learning, just as she was learning. She could see the way he paused, how he adjusted his path to avoid notice, and how he seemed to calculate each step with care. Luma began to understand that Nilo was clever, and cleverness in humans was a powerful tool. One afternoon, she tapped a small message on the metal bars of her cell. It was a simple pattern, a rhythm that meant I am intelligent. I can communicate. Nilo noticed it immediately. He crouched slightly to see better, his eyes widening in recognition. He understood. Slowly, carefully, he responded by arranging small objects near her cell, a pattern of stones and scraps forming a simple symbol of acknowledgement. Luma felt a thrill of connection. For the first time in years, someone outside the compound recognized her mind, her thoughts, and her presence. The guards did not notice these small exchanges, but Luma and Nilo felt them deeply. Each silent gesture became a secret conversation. They shared information about the compound without speaking aloud, exchanging understanding through observation and small signs. Luma felt a growing trust in Nilo, but she remained cautious. Trust was dangerous in a place like this, and she knew better than to give it fully too soon. One evening, Luma lay on her mattress, listening to the hum of machinery. Nilo was in the courtyard, speaking quietly with a worker who had been injured earlier that week. Luma watched him move with careful hands, helping to repair the worker's tools and offering advice in a calm voice. There was no demand, no threat, only guidance. She realized then that humans had something special. They cared in ways that were subtle but meaningful. Even in this harsh world, they could show kindness without weakness. Luma began to plan. She watched Nilo's movements and compared them to the guards' routines. She noticed how he avoided patrols and how he used shadows to stay out of sight. She thought about the knowledge he had, about machines, patterns, and human ingenuity. Perhaps together, they could find a way out. Perhaps her chains did not have to bind her forever. Nilo, meanwhile, began to notice more about Luma. He observed her in small moments, how she studied the stars through the small window, how her eyes moved quickly to track even the slightest motion in the compound, and how her body was controlled and strong despite the chains. He recognized intelligence, resilience, and courage. He had heard stories about alien captives, but meeting one in person was different. Luma's mind was sharp, her senses quick, and her spirit unbroken. He respected her strength and realized that any plan for freedom would need to include her not as a passive recipient of help, but as an equal partner. One night, as the compound grew quiet and the hum of machinery softened, Nilo left a small piece of cloth near her cell. It was folded carefully and contained a simple symbol, a circle with a line through it, meaning I understand. I see you. We can work together. Luma felt her heart race. It was a small act, but in this place, small acts could change everything. She took the cloth, studied it, and felt a sense of partnership. For the first time, she believed someone outside these walls wanted to help her because they saw her as a being, not a possession. The following day, Luma tested her plan carefully. She moved slightly in her chains, practicing a path she had memorized from observation. She paid attention to the sounds of footsteps, the timing of the guards, and the vibrations of machines. Nilo watched from a distance, his eyes alert but his body calm. He made subtle signals, confirming her movements without drawing attention. It was a silent rehearsal, a preparation for something greater. Over the next week, their quiet partnership grew. Luma began to anticipate Nilo's thoughts, and he began to anticipate hers. They shared strategies, knowledge, and encouragement. Luma realized that freedom would not come from force alone. It would come from intelligence, careful planning, and teamwork. Nilo's calm, respectful nature gave her confidence, while her knowledge of the compound and the guards gave him insight. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. Luma also discovered something else. Nilo's presence changed her perception of the world. For the first time, she imagined life beyond chains not just as a dream, but as a real possibility. She pictured herself walking under open skies, feeling wind on her skin, and choosing her own path. She pictured a world where she was respected and valued, not hidden and chained. The thought made her heart beat faster and filled her mind with determination. As night fell, Luma returned to her window. The stars were bright and distant, but now they seemed closer, reachable. She thought about Nilo, about the quiet strength he carried, and about the possibility of working together. She whispered a promise to herself, a vow that one day she would taste freedom and see the galaxy not as a prisoner, but as someone who belonged. Her chains were still heavy, and the guards still patrolled with watchful eyes, but inside, she felt something light and powerful, hope. And in that hope, a plan began to form, small at first, delicate and careful, but growing stronger every day. The arrival of the human stranger had changed everything. Luma knew that her life, her captivity, and her destiny were about to shift in ways she could not yet imagine. Nilo was more than a visitor. He was a key to a future she had long thought impossible. And together, they would find a way to act, to move, and to change everything. The days passed slowly in the mining compound, each one a mix of monotony and subtle observation. Luma's chains rattled slightly as she moved through her cell, stretching and testing her strength. Her mind was sharp, as always, and now it was filled with new thoughts. Nilo's presence had changed everything. She had learned to recognize his quiet signals, to see when he was watching for patterns, and to understand that he was not just observing, but planning. One afternoon, Nilo approached her cell while the guards were distracted by a minor machinery malfunction. He did not speak aloud. Instead, he placed a small piece of folded metal on the floor near her feet. The shape was simple, a triangle with a line through it. Luma studied it carefully and smiled quietly. It was a signal, a way to say without words, "I understand you. We can work together." Luma responded by moving a small pebble she had hidden in her cell. She placed it in a corresponding pattern. It was their first step in direct communication, a silent exchange of ideas and trust. She felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she realized that escape was not just a dream. It was possible. The next few days were spent in careful observation. Luma memorized every guard rotation, every timing of the security doors, and the layout of the compound's corridors. She even mapped the positions of the surveillance cameras in her mind, noting which angles could hide movement and which areas were constantly monitored. Nilo watched her carefully, impressed by her attention to detail and her ability to remain calm despite years of captivity. Late one night, when the compound was quiet, Luma tapped a series of small signals on her cell wall. Nilo was waiting in the shadows, and he noticed immediately. He crouched low and made a response with his fingers, signaling that he understood. They were beginning to build a language of gestures, a code only they could understand. It was a secret partnership, and it gave Luma a feeling she had not felt in years, control over her own life. Together, they began to make plans. Nilo asked questions about the compound, the guards, and the routines. Luma answered with gestures and subtle movements, showing him routes that were less guarded and pointing out the weaknesses she had observed. She told him about the storage rooms where tools were kept, the ventilation shafts that led to empty corridors, and the small maintenance doors that could be opened without attracting attention. Every detail was valuable, and every detail was memorized by Nilo with quiet determination. Nilo's presence also gave Luma courage. She had spent years hiding her intelligence, pretending to be weak and obedient to survive. But with him, she felt she could plan openly, think boldly, and even imagine a future where she would be free. She realized that survival alone was not enough. She wanted freedom, and she wanted it not just for herself, but for anyone trapped like her. One day, a small opportunity arose. A guard had left a maintenance panel slightly open, and Luma noticed it immediately. She signaled Nilo with a subtle gesture, and he understood. It was a chance to test a small movement without drawing attention. Carefully, Luma moved along the corridor, her chains clinking softly, but she timed every step to coincide with distant sounds, masking her movements. She reached the panel and examined it, imagining how she could use it in a larger escape plan. It was not a full attempt, but it was progress. Nilo watched from the shadows, ready to intervene if needed, but allowing her to act independently. He understood that her confidence and ability were as important as his knowledge. They were a team, each complementing the other. Luma's mind was quick, and her body was agile. Nilo's knowledge of patterns and strategy made him an invaluable ally. Together, they began to see a way forward, a path that might lead to freedom. Over the next week, they refined their plan. They identified the guards who were less vigilant, the routes that were least monitored, and the timing that offered the greatest chance of success. Luma practiced moving silently, her chains adjusted to minimize noise, while Nilo created small distractions in distant parts of the compound to test reactions. Every experiment, every rehearsal, brought them closer to understanding the limits and possibilities of the compound. Luma also began to notice the other captives. Many of them were quiet, resigned to their fate. Some were weak from years of poor treatment, while others had lost hope entirely. Luma realized that their freedom could be contagious. If she could escape, it might inspire others to find strength within themselves. Nilo seemed to understand this too. He observed silently, taking note of allies who might be helpful when the final plan was ready. One evening, Luma and Nilo shared a moment of quiet understanding. They were separated by the bars of her cell, yet they communicated more clearly than words could express. Luma tapped a pattern on the wall that represented trust and courage. Nilo responded with a gesture that meant preparation and patience. They smiled at each other, knowing that the days of planning were laying the foundation for something greater. Luma thought about what life would be like beyond the compound. She imagined walking under open skies, feeling wind on her skin, and making choices for herself. She imagined the stars as destinations, not just points of light through a small window. The idea of freedom gave her strength and focus. Every plan they made, every step they rehearsed, brought that vision closer to reality. As the week ended, Luma felt a quiet excitement. She had not felt this alive in years. The chains still bound her wrists, the walls still confined her, and the guards still patrolled with careful eyes. Yet inside, she was no longer a prisoner. Her mind was free, her body was strong, and her spirit was unbroken. With Nilo as an ally, she realized that escape was not just possible, it was inevitable if they acted with patience and intelligence. The partnership between the alien girl and the human was growing stronger. They shared more than plans, they shared understanding. Each had skills the other lacked. Luma brought knowledge of the compound, agility, and cunning born from survival. Nilo brought insight, strategy, and a calm determination that allowed them to see beyond fear. Together, they were preparing for the moment when action would replace planning, when the quiet signals and rehearsals would turn into a daring move toward freedom. As night fell, Luma returned to her window. The stars shone brightly, distant and untouchable, yet full of promise. She tapped a small rhythm on the wall, a message to Nilo that meant readiness. He responded from the shadows, a simple gesture of acknowledgement. They were ready to move forward, one careful step at a time. The chains around her wrists were still heavy, but her mind and spirit were unchained. Luma whispered to herself, a soft promise carried on the cold air of her cell. She would escape. She would be free. And she would show the galaxy that courage, intelligence, and the quiet strength of humans and aliens working together could change lives. The plan was forming, delicate but strong, and soon it would grow into action. The future was no longer a dream. It was a possibility, and she was ready to take it. The night was quiet, the hum of machinery softened as the workers and guards settled into their routines. Luma lay on her mattress, her silver eyes reflecting the faint light from the small window above. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, observing, memorizing, and rehearsing. Every detail mattered, every sound was a signal, and every movement had to be perfect. Tonight, she would attempt her first step toward freedom. Nilo waited just beyond the shadows, watching the corridors and the patrols with careful attention. He had tested the guards' reactions, studied the timing of doors, and considered the best possible route for Luma to move without being noticed. He did not rush her. He knew patience was more powerful than haste. Luma tapped a rhythm on the metal bars of her cell, a signal to him that she was ready. Nilo responded with a small nod, invisible to the guards, and stepped back to let her begin. Luma moved carefully, her chains clinking softly but in rhythm with the distant hum of machinery. She had practiced this route countless times in her mind. Her muscles were tense, her senses alert to every sound. She knew that a single mistake could cost her freedom, or worse. The ventilation panels, the maintenance doors, and the shadows were all part of her plan. Every step had to be precise. She reached the first maintenance panel, hidden in the corner of the corridor. The metal was cold against her hands, and she felt a thrill of anticipation as she pushed it open. It led to a narrow passage, dark and confined, but it was free from surveillance. Luma slipped inside, moving as silently as she could. Her heart pounded, but she focused on her breathing, on the rhythm of her steps, and on the knowledge that Nilo was waiting to guide her through the next stages. Outside, Nilo created a small distraction. A machine had a loose panel, and he quickly adjusted it, sending sparks and a small noise that drew the attention of a nearby guard. The guard moved to investigate, giving Luma precious moments to advance. She reached the end of the passage and paused, listening carefully. The corridor ahead was guarded by a pair of slavers, pacing slowly but predictably. She signaled to Nilo with a subtle gesture, and he responded by tossing a small object down a side corridor, drawing the guard's attention briefly. Luma seized the opportunity. She slipped past the guards, her movements quiet and precise. The chains around her wrists rattled slightly, but she timed each sound to the shifting vibrations of the floor. Her heart raced, but she felt a surge of confidence. Every step she had practiced for weeks was now in motion, and every step brought her closer to freedom. Then, just as she reached the outer gate, a shadow moved unexpectedly. One of the slavers had returned earlier than expected. Luma froze, her mind racing. She could retreat, but the path back was longer and more dangerous. She took a deep breath and decided to continue. She moved quickly, using the remaining shadows and the rhythm of distant machinery to cover her movements. Nilo noticed the unexpected threat immediately. He acted quickly, running to a nearby control panel. With careful timing, he triggered a small alarm in another section of the compound. The noise drew the guards away from the gate for just long enough. Luma darted forward, her chains clinking in time with the vibrations of the floor, until she reached the edge of the open area outside the main building. Freedom was within reach, yet so fragile. Luma could feel the cool air brushing against her skin, the first touch of the outside in years. Her eyes widened with hope and determination. But as she moved toward the perimeter, a guard shouted, discovering the disturbance. Luma's heart sank for a brief moment, but Nilo was already in motion. He created a second distraction, throwing objects and activating machinery to confuse the remaining guards. The chaos gave Luma the split second she needed to slip through the final doorway. She ran, feeling the ground beneath her feet, her chains still present but less restricting than the walls and eyes that had held her captive for so long. Nilo joined her shortly after, guiding her toward a hidden corridor he had discovered earlier. Together, they moved quickly but carefully, avoiding patrols and security sensors. Each step brought them further from the prison and closer to the unknown, a place where freedom waited. Despite their careful planning, the escape was not without risk. A guard appeared suddenly around a corner. Luma froze, but Nilo acted with calm precision. He used a piece of equipment to create a bright flash of light, temporarily blinding the guard. Luma took the opportunity to move past, her heart pounding but her focus unbroken. The danger reminded her that freedom required courage, intelligence, and teamwork. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small ventilation shaft leading outside the main compound. Luma climbed first, her muscles burning but her determination stronger than any pain. Nilo followed, supporting her if she slipped and watching for threats with careful eyes. When they emerged on the other side, the cool night air filled their lungs. Stars shone above them, distant and endless, but now reachable in ways they had only imagined. They paused for a moment, catching their breath and taking in the view. The mining planet stretched below them, a harsh world of metal, dust, and machinery, but they were no longer confined by it. Luma looked at Nilo, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief, gratitude, and newfound strength. He smiled, quietly proud of her courage and determination. They had succeeded, at least for now, in their first attempt at freedom. Yet both knew this was only the beginning. The slavers would search for her, alarms would sound, and the compound would tighten security in response. Luma and Nilo could not linger. They had a window of opportunity to move to safety, to reach a hidden area where they could plan their next steps. Together, they ran through the night, their movements synchronized, their minds focused, and their spirits unbroken. As they moved through the shadows, Luma felt a thrill of hope she had not known in years. The chains around her wrists were still a reminder of her past, but they no longer defined her. She had acted, she had risked, and she had taken control of her own destiny. Nilo's presence had been crucial, but it was her courage, her intelligence, and her perseverance that had made the escape possible. By the time they reached a small, concealed cave near the edge of the compound's perimeter, they were both exhausted but alive. Luma collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily but smiling faintly. Nilo knelt beside her, checking for injuries and making sure she was safe. They had succeeded in the first attempt, but both understood that the journey was far from over. Freedom was now a tangible goal, but it would require patience, planning, and continued courage. Luma looked up at the stars, her silver eyes shining brightly. She whispered softly to herself, a promise that carried across the cold night air. She would be free. She would see the galaxy beyond the chains. And she would not be alone. Nilo was beside her, an ally, a partner, and a symbol of hope. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next. The night passed quietly as they rested in the hidden cave. Luma felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a determination that burned stronger than ever. This first attempt had shown her that the impossible could be achieved with courage and intelligence. It had also shown her the power of partnership and trust. They were ready to face the next challenges, to continue the journey toward complete freedom, and to turn hope into reality. And so, under the stars of a distant world, Luma and Nilo prepared for the days ahead. The chains of her past were still visible, but the chains in her mind were gone. The first step had been taken, and the path toward freedom stretched before them, wide and full of possibility. The small cave near the edge of the compound became a temporary sanctuary for Luma and Nilo. The night air was cool and calm, a sharp contrast to the harsh metal walls and loud machinery of the compound. Luma stretched her limbs, testing her strength and flexibility, feeling more alive than she had in years. Nilo unpacked a small bag of supplies, offering her water and a simple meal. They ate in silence for a while, listening to the distant hum of machines and the faint noises of guards searching for the escaped captives. Luma's mind was racing, filled with ideas and possibilities. She knew this first escape attempt was only the beginning. The compound would soon tighten security, and the slavers would be more careful than ever. Freedom would require more than luck, it would require planning, intelligence, and allies. Luma turned to Nilo, her silver eyes shining with determination. She tapped a small rhythm on a metal piece she had carried from the compound, signaling her thoughts. Nilo watched carefully, understanding the message. It was time to find others, to build a network of allies who could help them and who might also gain their freedom. The next day, they moved cautiously through the shadows surrounding the compound. Nilo had studied the terrain and found hidden paths that led to abandoned maintenance buildings and storage areas. These places were lightly guarded or completely empty. They offered the perfect opportunity to meet others quietly, away from the eyes of the slavers. In one such abandoned storage room, they found two workers hiding, exhausted and weary. The humans had been overworked and mistreated, yet they still held a spark of intelligence and courage. Luma approached slowly, showing no threat, and tapped a small message on the wall. The workers understood immediately. Nilo spoke softly, explaining that they did not want to harm anyone but that freedom was possible if they worked together. The workers hesitated at first, fear and caution written clearly on their faces. Luma and Nilo shared small signs of trust, demonstrating their knowledge of the compound and their careful planning. Slowly, the workers agreed to join them, offering information about weak points in the compound, guard rotations, and storage areas that contained useful tools. Luma felt a surge of hope. They were no longer alone, and the network of allies could grow. Over the next few days, they continued to move carefully, gathering others who had either escaped or were hiding within the compound's outskirts. Luma's intelligence and quick thinking allowed them to find paths and hiding spots, while Nilo's calm leadership and strategic mind guided them safely. They discovered that even among the oppressed, courage could be found. Many had lost hope, but the presence of Luma and Nilo inspired small sparks of determination. One evening, as the group rested in a hidden area, Luma spoke to the new allies using small gestures and signals, helping them understand the plan and their roles. Nilo added explanations and strategies, emphasizing that intelligence, patience, and teamwork would be their greatest strengths. The captives began to feel a sense of purpose. They realized they were not simply escaping, they were reclaiming their lives, their freedom, and their dignity. Luma also began to notice the diversity of skills among the group. Some were strong and could create distractions or defend against threats. Others were clever and skilled with machinery, able to disable security measures or open locked doors. Each individual brought something valuable to the team. Luma's silver eyes sparkled with excitement as she saw how each person could contribute. They were no longer victims, they were a team. Despite this progress, the dangers were ever present. Patrols grew more frequent, and the compound was on high alert. Every move required careful timing and strategy. Luma and Nilo had to teach the group to move quietly, observe without being seen, and communicate without revealing themselves. Each day was a lesson in patience, precision, and teamwork. During one night mission, they approached a secondary storage area, hoping to find tools that could aid their future escape. Luma led the way, using shadows and hidden passages to move undetected. Nilo coordinated from behind, signaling when it was safe to move and when a guard was nearby. They retrieved a small collection of ropes, tools, and portable lights, enough to improve their chances for the next phase of their plan. The group was thrilled but remained cautious, knowing that even the smallest mistake could undo all their progress. Luma also encouraged the allies to share knowledge with each other. She taught them how to notice subtle patterns, how to read the movements of guards, and how to use their surroundings to their advantage. Nilo emphasized strategy, planning, and problem solving. The captives began to realize that their intelligence was a weapon just as powerful as strength or speed. With guidance, they were learning to become more than survivors, they were learning to be architects of their own destiny. One morning, as the sun began to rise, Luma and Nilo gathered the group in a hidden alcove. They reviewed the plan for the coming days, discussing escape routes, guard rotations, and fallback positions. Every detail was analyzed, every possibility considered. Luma felt a deep sense of pride in the group's growth. These captives, once resigned to a life of fear, were becoming bold, intelligent, and confident. The power of humanity, combined with Luma's resilience and intelligence, was transforming them. The group also shared stories quietly during their rest periods. Luma listened with interest, learning about the lives of her new allies, their hopes and their fears. Nilo encouraged them to see themselves as more than prisoners. The small connections and shared understanding strengthened the group's morale. They were no longer isolated individuals, they were a team with a shared goal, each member valuable and respected. As the days passed, Luma realized that freedom was not only about leaving the compound. It was about inspiring courage, building intelligence, and teaching trust. Each person who learned to think, plan, and act with purpose became a symbol of hope. The aliens and humans working together formed a bond that went beyond survival. They were proving that even in the harshest conditions, intelligence, courage, and cooperation could overcome oppression. By the time the sun set on the seventh day, the group was stronger, more confident, and ready to act. Luma and Nilo had built not only a plan but a team capable of facing the challenges ahead. Every member had a role, every movement was rehearsed, and every mind was sharp. The first attempt at escape had shown them that courage could defy fear. Now, with allies by their side, they were ready to take the next step toward true freedom. As night fell, Luma stood at the edge of the hidden alcove, her silver eyes reflecting the stars above. She felt a deep sense of determination and hope. The chains of her past were still present in memory, but the chains of fear and hopelessness were gone. Together with Nilo and their growing group of allies, she was ready to challenge the slavers, overcome danger, and claim the freedom they all deserved. The journey ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, Luma felt unstoppable. The impossible was now within reach, and the spark of courage that had begun with a single human's arrival was spreading, lighting a path toward a future that had once seemed unimaginable. The night air was thick with tension as Luma and Nilo gathered their small team near the edge of the mining compound. Every member of the group had a role to play. Each had trained carefully over the past days, learning how to move silently, observe the guards, and respond to unexpected threats. Luma felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was the moment they had been preparing for. Freedom was within reach, but the challenge ahead was enormous. Nilo spoke quietly, reviewing the plan with everyone. The group would split into small teams, each moving along a designated path to avoid drawing attention. Luma would lead the first team, using her knowledge of hidden passages and weak points in the compound's defenses. Nilo would coordinate movements from a central point, ready to create distractions or help if danger appeared. Every member of the group nodded, understanding the importance of precision, timing, and teamwork. As they moved into position, the compound was alive with activity. Guards patrolled the corridors, machines hummed and clanked, and distant lights swept across open areas. Luma's heart beat steadily, her mind sharp and alert. She signaled the first team forward, moving silently through the shadows. The chains around her wrists had been removed by careful planning and small tools hidden during previous rehearsals. She felt her freedom physically as well as mentally, though danger was never far. The first obstacle appeared quickly. A pair of guards approached the hallway that Luma had intended to use. She froze, calculating the timing, and signaled to her team to hide in a small alcove nearby. Nilo, observing from a distance, triggered a minor disruption in the machinery, sending sparks and noise to draw the guards away. The plan worked perfectly, and the guards moved toward the disturbance, leaving the hallway clear. Luma led the team forward, silently and confidently. They reached a maintenance corridor that had been rarely used. Luma guided the group through the narrow space, her knowledge of the compound proving invaluable. Every step was measured, every sound minimized. Nilo kept watch from another angle, making sure no unexpected patrols interfered. The tension was high, but the group moved with coordination and focus. Suddenly, one of the younger captives tripped over a small pipe, creating a faint noise. Luma froze and quickly signaled for calm. Nilo reacted immediately, activating a light distraction on the other side of the compound. The guard nearest the noise turned to investigate, allowing the group to continue without harm. Luma whispered encouragement to the group, reinforcing their confidence and reminding them to stay calm under pressure. As they advanced, the team encountered a locked gate. Luma examined the mechanism quickly, then signaled to a group member skilled in machinery. Within moments, the gate clicked open, allowing them to pass into a larger corridor leading toward the outer perimeter. Nilo guided another small team to create a distraction further inside the compound, drawing attention away from Luma's path. Every movement, every plan, was working in harmony. The final challenge was the outer security checkpoint. 2 guards monitored the area, and surveillance devices scanned the perimeter. Luma studied the timing carefully. When the guards walked past, she signaled to the team to move. They advanced quickly, staying close to shadows, using crates and machinery for cover. Nilo coordinated a final distraction, activating lights and sounds in a section distant from their path. The guards looked toward the noise, leaving a brief but critical opening. Luma led her team across the open area, each step measured, each breath controlled. They reached the edge of the compound, and the cool night air filled their lungs. Stars sparkled above, distant but now seeming within reach. For the first time in years, the captives felt real freedom, even if only for a moment. But the journey was not yet complete. The terrain beyond the compound was rough and unprotected, and vigilance was essential. The group moved quickly, keeping low to avoid detection. Luma guided them to a hidden ravine that led to an abandoned transport area. Nilo followed closely, checking for signs of pursuit. The group felt their hearts pounding, the adrenaline of escape fueling every step. Luma encouraged them, reminding them that courage and intelligence had brought them this far. Every member of the team was alert, ready to face challenges that might arise. Suddenly, a patrol appeared on the far side of the ravine. Luma quickly assessed the situation and signaled for the team to halt. Nilo, seeing the guards, used a small flare to create light and confusion, drawing the patrol away from the hidden path. The team moved silently while the guards investigated the distraction. Luma's leadership, combined with Nilo's quick thinking, ensured that no one was harmed. Finally, after hours of careful movement, they reached the outskirts of the mining compound. The machines were distant, the lights barely visible, and the guards seemed far behind. Luma led the team into a small hidden valley where they could rest and recover. Exhaustion was heavy, but the sense of accomplishment was stronger. They had escaped the compound, faced danger, and succeeded through intelligence, courage, and teamwork. Luma looked at Nilo, gratitude and respect shining in her silver eyes. He smiled, acknowledging the strength and brilliance she had displayed. The escape had been possible because of her knowledge, her agility, and her careful planning. Nilo had added strategy and coordination, but Luma's leadership had been the key. The group had learned that courage combined with intelligence could overcome even the harshest oppression. As they rested, Luma spoke to the group, explaining the next steps. They would need to move carefully to reach a safe location beyond the compound's reach. The journey was far from over, but the first phase was complete. Luma emphasized patience, observation, and teamwork. Every member of the group was valuable, every mind important, and every act of courage meaningful. The night passed quietly. Luma stood at the edge of the valley, looking up at the stars. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of true possibility. The chains of her past were gone, and the path ahead was full of hope. Nilo joined her, and together they planned the next stage of the journey. They would find safety, help the group recover, and prepare for the challenges that awaited in the wider world. Luma whispered to herself, a promise carried on the wind. She would protect these allies, guide them, and ensure that freedom was not just a fleeting moment. She would show that intelligence, courage, and the quiet strength of humans and aliens working together could change lives. The Great Escape was only the beginning. Beyond the valley, a new world awaited, full of possibilities and the promise of freedom. And so, under the stars, Luma, Nilo, and their group of allies rested for the first time without fear. They had faced danger, used their intelligence, and acted with courage. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest places, hope, skill, and teamwork could create light. The journey was far from over, but the first step toward true freedom had been taken. The first rays of the distant sun broke over the horizon, painting the rough terrain in shades of gold and orange. Luma stood at the edge of the valley, her silver eyes reflecting the light and the promise of a new day. Around her, the group of allies stirred, stretching and waking after a night of cautious rest. Every face showed relief, exhaustion, and determination. For the first time in years, they were free from the walls, the chains, and the constant surveillance of the slavers. Nilo moved among them, quietly checking for injuries and ensuring that everyone had enough water and food. His calm presence gave the group confidence, and his intelligence allowed him to anticipate any potential danger in the surrounding area. Luma approached him, her expression serious yet filled with hope. She knew that freedom was not just about escaping the compound, it was about building a life beyond it, one that offered safety, dignity, and purpose. Today, Luma said softly, tapping a small symbol on a piece of metal she carried, we move further. We find a safe place where no one can harm us. We rest, learn, and prepare for what comes next. Nilo nodded, understanding her message instantly. The group gathered quickly, ready to move, their spirits lifted by the success of their escape and the possibility of a new life. The journey beyond the compound was not easy. The terrain was rough and uneven, with rocks and hidden ravines. Luma led the way, using her knowledge of the surrounding land to find paths that offered cover and safety. Nilo moved at her side, observing carefully, guiding the group, and ensuring that no one fell behind. Each step was deliberate, each movement calculated. They had escaped once, and now they had to secure a future. Along the way, Luma and Nilo discovered small pockets of nature, areas untouched by the mining compound. Trees, streams, and small patches of greenery reminded them of the worlds they had once only imagined. Luma paused often, teaching the group how to find fresh water, how to recognize safe plants, and how to navigate without being detected. Nilo encouraged problem solving, helping the group develop strategies for challenges they might face beyond the valley. The bonds among the allies grew stronger. They shared stories quietly during breaks, learning about each other's lives, dreams, and fears. Luma encouraged these conversations, knowing that understanding and trust were just as important as skill and strength. Nilo observed, offering guidance, teaching calm decision-making, and reinforcing the importance of teamwork. The group was becoming more than a collection of individuals, they were a community, united by courage, intelligence, and the pursuit of freedom. After several days of careful travel, they reached a hidden plateau high above the valley floor. From there, they could see the mining compound in the distance, a stark reminder of the oppression they had left behind. Luma's heart swelled with pride and determination. They had escaped a life of captivity, and now they had the chance to create something new. The plateau offered safety, clear views, and resources to establish a temporary camp. Luma and Nilo worked together to organize the group. They assigned responsibilities, some gathered firewood, others searched for food, and a few prepared secure sleeping areas. Every task was important, and every member contributed. Luma taught the group basic survival skills, emphasizing observation, careful planning, and quick thinking. Nilo added lessons in strategy and coordination, showing how to work as a team to solve problems and overcome obstacles. During the first night on the plateau, Luma gazed at the stars, the same stars she had once watched through a tiny window in her cell. Now, they seemed closer, more reachable. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the chains, the captivity, the planning, and the daring escape. And she thought about the future, wide and open, full of possibilities. Nilo joined her silently, sitting beside her. You led them well, he said softly. Your courage and intelligence guided everyone. You should be proud. Luma smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the past but also the light of hope. We all contributed, she replied. Freedom is not just about one person. It is about all of us, working together. Nilo nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The following days were spent strengthening their new home. The group built simple shelters, secured fresh water, and explored the surrounding terrain for resources. Luma and Nilo continued to teach, plan, and observe. Every day, the allies grew more confident, learning to trust themselves and each other. They shared knowledge, practiced skills, and celebrated small victories. What had begun as a desperate escape was becoming the foundation of a new community. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the plateau, a small figure approached from the distant trees. Luma and Nilo moved cautiously but soon realized it was another escaped captive, drawn by the stories of freedom. Luma welcomed them with open hands and gestures of friendship, showing that the community was growing. Each new member brought skills, knowledge, and courage, strengthening the group and reinforcing the power of cooperation. Luma realized that their journey had changed more than just their immediate circumstances. The experience had taught them the value of intelligence, patience, and teamwork. It had shown that courage was not just a moment of bravery but a consistent choice to act wisely, to trust, and to lead. The group was stronger, not because of physical power, but because of shared knowledge, respect, and purpose. Weeks passed, and the plateau became a thriving, hidden sanctuary. Luma and Nilo watched as the allies developed routines, learned skills, and built confidence. The stars above reminded them of the vast possibilities beyond the plateau, and they began to dream of exploring, learning, and connecting with other worlds. Luma understood that freedom was not just an escape from chains, it was the ability to choose, to grow, and to shape the future. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and stars appeared, Luma spoke to the group. She reminded them of how far they had come, the courage they had shown, and the intelligence that had guided their escape. She encouraged them to continue learning, to trust each other, and to remain vigilant. Nilo added words of strategy and hope, emphasizing that their strength lay in unity and careful planning. The group listened quietly, feeling pride, purpose, and determination. Luma looked at Nilo, gratitude and respect in her silver eyes. "We have done more than survive," she said. "We have learned, we have taught, and we have grown. This is only the beginning." Nilo nodded, smiling. "And together, we will continue. We will face whatever comes next with courage and intelligence." The stars shone brightly over the plateau, a symbol of endless possibilities. Luma understood that her life had changed forever. She had gone from captivity to freedom, from chains to choice, and from isolation to community. The journey had been difficult, but it had revealed the strength, courage, and intelligence within herself and the allies around her. As the night deepened, Luma felt a sense of peace. The past was behind her, the present was filled with hope, and the future was wide open. She knew that challenges would come, but she also knew that intelligence, courage, and cooperation could overcome any obstacle. Together, they had not only escaped, they had created a beginning that could shine like the stars above. And so, on a hidden plateau under the endless sky, Luma, Nilo, and their allies embraced a new beginning. They were free, strong, and united. They had learned the value of intelligence, patience, and courage. And they were ready to face the universe, not as captives, but as explorers, teachers, and creators of their own destiny. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was real, alive, and shining as brightly as the stars above.